That clap still wasn't as loud as a suppressed gunshot from a .22, which is one of the smallest and quietest calibers available. This shot would be between 110 and 120 decibels. According to the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, that is as loud as a jackhammer or an ambulance siren. On average, a suppressor lowers the decibel level of a gunshot by 20 to 35 decibels. Suppressors do not make guns nearly as quiet as TV and movies would have you believe. This misinformation is part of the reason for the increased regulation of suppressors, in my opinion. I have learned about suppressors through my experience using and researching them. I have used them on several different guns from Wisconsin to Texas, and I believe this qualifies me to speak on this topic. Today, I hope to use my experience to persuade you that suppressors should receive the same regulation as traditional firearms. Let's start by discussing the problems with the increased regulation of suppressors. The increased regulation and weight count getting suppressors is a major issue with gun laws in America. Before jumping into the regulations surrounding suppressors, let's first define what a suppressor or silencer really is. Essentially, a suppressor is a muffler for a gun that reduces the noise produced by a gunshot by slowing down the speed at which the gases escape. This is done by it's pretty much just a tube, and there's a whole bunch of baffles in it that the gas has to travel through before it gets out the end. Buying a suppressor involves getting a $200 tax stamp, choosing whether to register as an individual trust or a trust, and submitting a Form 4 to the ATF. You also have to submit that Form 4 with all your personal information and fingerprints to the chief law enforcement officer in your area. Prior to any of those things happening, there are several requirements that must be met. You have to be a resident of the United States and reside in a state where suppressors are legal to possess. You have to be a minimum of 21 years old, and that Form 4 involves your personal information, make, model, and serial number of the suppressor, a fingerprint card, in addition to a passport-style photo. These increased regulations and the wait time cause people to have more hoops to jump through to receive the benefits of using a suppressor. This wait time can cause people to experience more hearing damage while they wait for the suppressor to arrive. Wearing hearing protection such as earmuffs or earplugs while hunting is detrimental to your success because you can't hear animals, and already without any hearing protection, you can only hear less than 50% of the noises that an animal can. This leads many hunters to not wear hearing protection, like myself, and experience hearing damage when they shoot their unsuppressed weapon without wearing hearing protection. The waiting period can range from 90 days to as many as 9 months. Also, opposed to regular firearms, you must pay an extra $200 just to be able to buy a suppressor, in addition to the already high cost of the item. Many people in America recently have had the opinion that America should have gun laws that more closely resemble those of European countries. However, in France and Finland, you can just walk into a gun store, buy a suppressor, and walk out the door. And in many of these countries, suppressors are encouraged as they are quiet, so you don't bother other people and you don't experience as much hearing damage. Now that we have covered the problem, let's shift our focus to the solution of this problem. The solution to this issue is removing the additional regulations and making the process the same as buying a firearm. One of the reasons I think the regulations should be the same is the Pittman-Robertson Act, now known as the Federal Aid in Wildlife Restoration. Pretty much, there's an excise tax on every firearm that you buy, and that excise tax is 11% on long guns and ammunition and 10% on handguns. Since it was passed in 1937, this has given over $7 billion to conservation. If suppressors were subject to the same regulations, they could be included in this act and provide even more money for conservation. With climate change and expanding cities, conservation needs all the help it can get, and the main reason I think this change would help is common sense. Every other item that goes through the same process to be acquired as a weapon, such as a fully automatic firearm or a short-barreled rifle or something along those lines. But to get a metal tube with baffles on the inside, you have to go through the same process, and it doesn't really make sense to me because I wouldn't consider those really on the same playing field at all. A suppressor is a weapon accessory that many countries with much more stringent gun laws allow people to buy with the same or even fewer regulations than a firearm. It is logical that they do this way because there's not really any safety risk to suppressors. I would argue that it's even safer because it limits hearing damage and can increase accuracy in some weapons. Many centerfire rifles are not hearing safe even when you use a suppressor, which you really wouldn't think when you watch the movies and they shoot someone 5 feet away and they don't even notice. Also, even when you have a suppressor, that doesn't do anything with the sonic boom of when the bullet breaks the sound barrier. Subsonic cartridges are offered, which would make it a lot quieter, but those are much less effective. Also, it is very rare for crimes to be committed using a suppressed weapon, because typically the people that are doing that kind of stuff don't really want to get a $200 tax stamp and wait for 9 months. If you were to be a victim of a home invasion and your weapon was outfitted with a suppressor, only people registered to use it would be able to defend themselves. So pretty much if you were incapacitated somehow and your wife picked up the gun and she wasn't registered, she would be a felon and have to go to jail because she wasn't registered to use the gun with a suppressor, which really doesn't seem very logical in my opinion. All of these things play into the common sense that suppressors do not require the much more involved regulations that they are currently under. The final reason I'm going to share is the ease of buying a firearm currently compared to a suppressor. I still think there should be regulations regarding suppressors, but I don't think it should be quite as extreme as it is now. To buy a gun, you just go to the dealer, pick out the one you want, fill out the forms, and then they call in your background check, and then you can leave with the gun. And you still get the background check, which reduces the chances of less savory people getting the suppressor. Making this process easier would allow many people to get the access and benefits of a suppressor. I hope that today I have made it clear that suppressors should have the same regulations as firearms, opposed to the current increased regulations they are under. Over the first half of this speech, I provide reasoning why this is a problem due to the tedious and long process preventing people from getting the benefits of suppressors. The second half was devoted to outlining the solution and how the solution would help by increasing funding for conservation and allowing more people to have access to suppressors and the benefits they offer. My experience across the country have only been positive, and I hope you now have a better idea of suppressors and why they should have fewer regulations that match those of buying a firearm.